everyone. So today I'm joined by an interesting guest, Dr. Avi Loeb. He is a distinguished theoretical physicist and a cosmologist, renowned for his pioneering research in astrophysics and his bold hypothesis on extraterrestrial life. As the Frank B. Baird Jr. Professor of Science at Harvard University and the director of the Institute for Theory and Computation, Dr. Loeb has authored over 800 scientific papers and several influential books. And this one is my favorite. Please make sure you guys check it out on Amazon. And he has written amazing things. He's also on, social media, and he writes a lot on Medium, if I'm not mistaken. And amazing things are there. And his also, work includes Extraterrestrial, the first sign of intelligent life beyond Earth. Dr. Loeb is also the founder of the Galileo Project, a groundbreaking initiative dedicated to the scientific search for evidence of extraterrestrial technological artifacts. So without any delay, let me welcome Dr. Avi Loeb. Hello, Dr. Avi Loeb. Thank you so much for joining in today.
Thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure.
Thank you so much. Dr. Loeb, as someone who has studied how paradigm shift shapes human knowledge, I personally see your work as revolutionary. And by revolutionary, I mean in a way it challenges the traditional astrophysics. Could you share what inspired you to explore the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence and how it led to the founding of the Galileo Project, Dr. Loeb?
Well, every day when I read the news, I'm somewhat disappointed by the terrestrial intelligence we have. Should I say terrestrial stupidity in geopolitics, where we engage in conflicts, we do not cooperate, and perhaps that's a relic of the past. Humans used to fight for limited resources, so zero-sum games. But when you look at the cosmos, you get a very different picture. You realize that there is much more real estate beyond Earth. What we focus on Earth here is very limited. It's just a rock that was left over from the formation of the sun, a very small fraction of the mass of the sun. And first of all, there are 100 billion stars just in the Milky Way galaxy alone, and then a trillion galaxies in the observable volume of the universe. But it's not so much the size, it's the fact that we know that there are billions of Earth-Sun analogs that have similar conditions to the solar system, and therefore there must be intelligent beings out there. If we came out of a soup of chemicals on this Earth, similar circumstances might have led to other intelligent students in our class of civilizations and in the Milky Way galaxy. And we tend to think just about ourselves, but we thought initially that we are the center of the universe, and then we realized no, the Earth is actually moving around the sun, and the sun is one out of many stars moving around the center of the Milky Way. So we are not at the center of stage. We still, many people in academia still believe that it's an extraordinary claim to imagine that there are intelligent beings, or there were intelligent beings near other stars. I see it as an ordinary claim. And in my opinion, it's a very reasonable thing to search for. And for us to insist that we are unique and special is very arrogant. And in fact, when you look at the news every day, you realize there is room for improvement. So there might be things that are much smarter than us out there that we can learn from. And it's just a missed opportunity, because are we alone, or is the most romantic question in science, where you think that we might have a partner out there or a sibling in our family that might be a role model for us. And just ignoring that possibility is really unfortunate, because this is the kind of question that the entire public cares about, and the public funds science. It's a question that would transform the future of humanity. If we realize that there are other civilizations that were more accomplished than we are, it will inspire us to explore space. It will change our aspirations here on Earth instead of fighting each other, we might invest the same funds or a fraction of them in the direction of working together towards, going into space instead of staying on this Earth. And there are lots of things that we can do far better. And moreover, there is, of course, also the potential risk from alien technology that would be visiting us. And if we want to protect humanity from any potential predators or threats, we need to be exploring what is out there. We just don't know how much traffic there is because we are not collecting the data, and because the astronomers insist that everything in the sky must be rocks, like this is and that anything beyond that is speculation. I don't think it's speculation, because we launched spacecraft and we know that we are capable of leaving the solar system if we just define that as our goal. And there are already some spacecraft on the way leaving the solar system. Now, you asked how did I come to explore all of this, and the reason is that there were over the past decade there were survey telescopes that allowed us for the first time to discover objects from outside the solar system. And of course, the assumption of everyone around me was that these must be like the asteroids or comets that we're familiar with in the solar system. It's just like exploring your backyard and saying everything in the backyard must be rocks of the type that I'm familiar with, even if objects come from the street. But we all know that every now and then you might find a tennis ball that was thrown by a neighbor, or something that indicates that the neighbor's yard is different than yours. And that is not regarded as legitimate within the current discussion. And I say that is an opportunity for us to learn something new about our neighbors. And so this discovery, there were 3 objects discovered by telescopes. And we are entering a new era now where the Rubin Observatory in Chile will find a new interstellar object every few months. And I say that this is a great opportunity for humanity to check if each and every one of them is a rock, or it might be one of them might be a technological artifact that was manufactured by another civilization. So not only that we found the 3 objects, 2 of them already showed signs of being anomalous, very different than previous rocks. And I can get into details, but at any event, that's what brought me into this question.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Avi, when I read your analysis of interstellar object, I was struck by your courage in considering non-traditional explanations, where the evidence doesn't neatly fit in the existing theories that we have out there. And also, I have observed in your book, Extraterrestrial, you discuss about Oumuamua. And I was also very fascinated, a couple of months back, about Oumuamua, and I was studying it. And that's how, I came across your work and I got into your work. What specific characteristics, Dr. Avi, led you to propose that it might be an artificial probe and nothing natural? And how has the scientific community, that's a big one, how has the scientific community responded to that?
Right. So I basically had no agenda, but Oumuamua, which was the first interstellar object to have been discovered from outside the solar system, it showed anomalies. At first, it was cataloged as a comet. And then there was no gas or dust around it. So it was clearly not a comet of the type that we're familiar with, because usually you see a cometary tail extending away from the sun of evaporated ices and some dust around it. There was nothing of that sort. Even when the Spitzer Space Telescope examined it very carefully, there was no evidence that it loses any mass in outgassing the way that comets do. So it was not a comet, but then it exhibited an excess push away from the sun without any mass loss. That is difficult to explain. How do you get a force pushing it away from the sun without it losing mass in the opposite direction towards the sun? And then, in addition to that, the brightness of the object changed by a factor of 10 as it was tumbling every 8 hours. And that implied, after a detailed analysis of the variation, it implied the object is flat, at least 10 times longer than it is wide, and just tumbling. And I suggested that it's actually a very thin object that is pushed by reflecting sunlight. And in fact, just 3 years later, the same telescope in Hawaii, Pan-STARRS, that discovered Oumuamua, discovered another object which was definitely pushed by reflecting sunlight. And the astronomers realized within a month, that was in 2020, the object was given the name 2020 SO. And they realized within a few months that, within a month, that this object is actually human-made. It's a rocket booster that was launched by NASA in 1966, because the spectrum was identical to an alloy, aluminum metal that was on the surface of this object. And so it became clear that it's technological in origin, because we know that we produced it in 1966. The question is, who produced Oumuamua? Why can't it be a technological object similar to 2020 SO, this second object, that was floating in space from another civilization? And then there was a similar incident just on January 2nd this year, 2025, where the Minor Planet Center cataloged a near-Earth asteroid. And then they realized, oh, that one moves along the path of the Tesla Roadster car that was launched by SpaceX. And then they realized that's not a rock, it's not an asteroid, it's a car. And so what I'm saying is that we launched objects to space that are technological, and it's just completely natural for us to imagine that there could be space trash or even functional devices that are entering the solar system from outside, and we are not familiar with how many of them are there, and we should just examine critically whether Oumuamua was one. And unfortunately, the astronomers did not collect enough data to figure it out, so we are left in the mystery of Oumuamua. Now it's too faint for us to observe it. But there was a new object that was discovered just in July 2025 called 3i Atlas by a telescope called Atlas in Chile that is 0.5 meter in size. And this new object appears to be anomalous as well, but for a completely different set of reasons. And I can get into those if you wish.
Okay, I mean, my next question is related to 3i Atlas. And in my own exploration of anomalies, I have noticed how rare it is for scientists, I mean, like you and a lot of other scientists, to publicly challenge, the conventional models that are out
Right.
there. Now, Dr. Avi, you strongly suggest, I mean, based on my observation, you strongly suggest that the interstellar object that we know as 3i Atlas might even be a kind of an alien spacecraft. Now, I would want to know what features distinguish it from typical comet, and why do you interpret it as possibly artificial, Dr.
Right.
Avi?
So before I address 3i Atlas, I should also mention what the conventional thinking is about Oumuamua. And the latest, well, initially, different teams of astronomers argued that it must be a rock of a type that we've never seen before. For example, there was a suggestion of a hydrogen iceberg, or a nitrogen iceberg, or a dust bunny, a collection of dust particles in a very rarefied configuration that is 100 times less dense than air, and it's being pushed by reflecting sunlight. All kinds of suggestions that are also speculative, and but the argument was that it's definitely not artificial, it must be natural, and here are examples of natural things that we've never seen before. Now, of course, if you imagine a caveman finding a cell phone, that caveman would say that this object looks like a rock of a type that I've never seen before. I mean, so for them to argue that it must be natural and therefore a rock of a type that we've never seen before is clearly an oxymoron. I mean, because either you understand what it is, or you say all possibilities are on the table because we don't know what it is. And then most recently, there was just in December 2024, there was a new paper of all the experts together saying that 3i Atlas was, that the Oumuamua, one eye Oumuamua, was most likely a dark comet, meaning it was a comet, but we couldn't see the tail. It was invisible. It was made of materials, or it was too dilute for us to see. But the point of the matter, the fact of the matter, is that it had to lose about 10% of its mass. So we should have seen if it was ordinary materials. And moreover, saying something is a dark comet is really inappropriate unless you detect any evaporation from the object, because it's just like going to the zoo and you are an expert on zebras, and you say, when you see an elephant, you say it's a zebra without stripes. I mean, that is an oxymoron. Either, an animal that doesn't have stripes can be a completely different animal. An elephant is different from a zebra. You can't say that an elephant is a zebra without stripes. And just saying a dark comet, on the one hand, you pretend to know what the object is. You say it's a comet, but then you say, well, I don't see the signature of a comet. So that, to me, is like cheating. It's not really fair to say that. Because you would say that a spacecraft that maneuvers, behaves like a dark comet, and it's not a comet at all. And how, so I think this is meant to display a sense of we understand this object. It's a comet. It's just a comet of a type that we've never seen before. We don't know what kind of a comet it is, but because we haven't seen the cometary tail. But then how do you know that it's a comet? So this is the way that anomalies are being shoved under the carpet of traditional thinking, and then the astronomers say, "Oh, we debunked. We know that it's a natural object because it's maybe a dark comet. Let's move on. Forget about it." And it's really a cheat. And for them to pretend that as experts on comets, they explain this object as a dark comet, meaning an object that they've never seen before as a comet. How that requires a very conservative mindset, but also a mindset that is not allowing other more imaginative solutions. And it's really unfortunate because before meteors were discovered, it was thought that rocks cannot fall from the sky. And after meteors were discovered, were realized to be rocks falling from the sky in 1803, it became conventional to imagine that there are rocks in the sky. And now the experts insist that everything in the sky is rocks, even though we produce technological objects. So anyway, coming back to 3i Atlas, the anomalies there are quite different. First, it's the size of the object. It looks like the minimum size, based on the fact that it needs to be very massive. We see that it's losing mass, very different from Oumuamua. It does lose mass, but it doesn't show any deviation from a path that you would expect based on gravity alone. Oumuamua was deviating. It had some non-gravitational acceleration, and 3i Atlas does not. So that means that it's very massive. And I calculated that it needs to be at least a million times more massive than Oumuamua. And then this is just the third object. So the question is, why haven't we seen a million Oumuamuas before we see this one? How can it be so massive? It's very unusual. That's one anomaly, that we wouldn't expect it to be a rock, because there is just not enough mass in interstellar space to deliver such a rock of giant proportions, bigger than 5 kilometers in diameter, comparable to the size of Manhattan Island. Such a rock should be extremely rare. We can't expect it to be delivered to the inner solar system once per decade. So that is one anomaly. And then the second has to do with the fact that it came on a trajectory that was aligned with the plane of the planets around the sun, and within 5 degrees. And the chance of that happening at random is 1 in 500. If you look at the trajectory, it looks like it's perfectly coming along the plane of the planets, as if it was on a reconnaissance mission. So the question is, was this path designed by some intelligence? And it also arrives at a very special time that allows it to pass close to Mars, close to Venus, and close to Jupiter, But when it arrives closest to the sun, and that will be on October 29th, 2025, it will actually be on the opposite side from where the Earth is. So we won't be able to see it. When you look at the sky during the daytime in the coming week, you just need to keep in mind that the 3i Atlas is hiding behind the sun. And actually, when it comes closest to the sun, that's the perfect opportunity for a technological object to do a maneuver, because it can take advantage of the gravitational assist by the sun. And that's what we do with spacecraft. And so therefore, we should monitor what happens to it after closest approach. And maybe it was hiding from us on Earth for a reason. And then in addition to the trajectory, there are some anomalies about the object itself that, for example, it shows a glow ahead of it in the direction of the sun rather than behind it, the way that comets do. They have usually the dust that is shed by comets is pushed backwards away from the sun by the radiation pressure from the sunlight. And the gas is pushed behind the object by the solar wind. And for this object, during July and August, we took images, and the Hubble Space Telescope showed very clearly that there is a glow in front of the object towards the sun rather than behind it. And then the composition of the gas that is detected around it is unusual. For example, there is very little water in it, about 4% by mass, according to the Webb telescope data. Also, there is nickel a very high abundance of nickel with no detectable iron in some spectra that were taken. And the only place where we see nickel without iron that we know about is in industrially produced nickel alloys, because in nature, in all the comets that we looked in the past, there was comparable amount of nickel and iron. So the question is whether the surface of this object was manufactured technologically, because we produce nickel alloys for aerospace applications. And in addition, the direction of arrival of this object was coincident with within 9 degrees with a very anomalous radio signal that was discovered in 1977 called the WOW signal. So the object arrived from a direction where the WOW signal arrived to within 9 degrees with a chance of 0.6% of being in the same region. And moreover, there is a very negative polarization coming from this object that was never seen before for other comets. So all kinds of anomalies, and it's difficult to know what to do with them. And I suggest just monitoring the object, getting the best resolution we can of the region around it. And in fact, there was an opportunity when it passed close to Mars on October 2nd, and we used the high-rise camera there on the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter there. But NASA is shut down because of the government shutdown in the US, and we haven't seen yet that image that should be better by a factor of 3 in resolution. We should have a pixel size of 30 kilometers from the high-rise camera. But we will have additional opportunities. The JUICE spacecraft that was launched by the European Space Agency will be able to observe 3i Atlas after it passes closest to the sun in the first week of November. And then on March 16, 2026, the Juno spacecraft near Jupiter could observe it. The closest distance that it will ever get to the Earth will be accomplished on December 19th, just a week before Christmas. And that would be also a very good time for ground-based and space-based telescopes to observe it, because it will be after it passed close to the sun. So if it's a regular comet, we might expect much more gas and dust around it, although we haven't seen any clear evidence for dust so far. And if it's not a comet, of a type that we are familiar with, then the question is what is its nature, and especially if it does a maneuver, then I think it will change everything. If we see that it either changes course after passing close to the sun, or it sheds off some mini probes that approach the planets, the stock market may crash.
True. Dr. Avi, I mean, me as a psychotherapist, I have observed and I have seen a lot of people, they resist new ideas because new idea is something that threatens their established belief. And I have seen that, with the science and scientific domain also, they too, face that tension. I would want to know, how do you personally respond to skepticism and even criticism that the search of extraterrestrial life is, speculative or unscientific?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, because when I wrote the first paper about Oumuamua, that was my first deviation from the beaten path, suggesting that it may be technological. The paper was accepted for publication within 3 days. And the referee said, that's a great idea, because we know that this object is flat. Maybe it's pushed by reflecting sunlight. Then the media started going crazy. A few days later, I had a television crew at my front door. I was on the way to Germany for a conference, and they asked, we have just one question. Are we alone? And there was a huge, when I arrived in Germany, there were like 25 reporters that wanted to speak with me. They put all of them in one room, and one of an Italian reporter shouted from the back of the room, do you think that you are Galileo, that that you are discovering something really fundamental? And then as soon as I got all this attention, and CNN, for example, interviewed me on Michael Smerconish, and they cited verbatim what I said in the paper. Like, that never happens in astronomy. Nobody cares about papers, citing a specific sentence on a very popular television broadcast. And so I got a lot of attention, and then I started seeing my colleagues responding negatively and starting to say, no, it's just a rock of a type that we've never seen before. No, you should not speak to the public about it. And then it intensified. This scrutiny intensified, and I started getting personal attacks. And then when I wrote my book, I immediately was attacked as if you are doing it in order to sell the book. But that was not at all the case, because I wrote all these papers before the book, and what are they talking about? And then I went on an expedition after I discovered with my student an interstellar meteor. We went to retrieve materials, and then it became extremely hostile, because again, the media was interested. Netflix had a documentary filming crew following me, and they, it became like mud wrestling, because like there were a number of people in academia that started saying, oh, we don't believe the US government data on this meteor. And then someone else said, oh, they just went to the wrong place, because it could have been a truck passing near a place where they reported that they used some seismic data. But the point is, we went to that place not because of the seismic data. We went to that place because there was a fireball that released a lot of light that was detected by US government satellites, and they gave us the location. So that's where we went. But it's like someone saying that your sister has very bad qualities, but you don't have a sister. And how do you defend yourself? So there was all this scrutiny, some of it reported by even newspapers like the New York Times, and I wrote to the editor of the New York Times, if you report this way about the scientific project, why should I trust anything you say about politics? It's really terrible. They would say we went to the wrong place when we were guided by the light emitted, not by the seismic. And they said, that's what someone says, we just spoke to that person. We didn't speak to you because we had limited time. I mean, that is completely unprofessional. And then the colleagues intensified their. They would write papers that are referring to the materials we found without actually having access to the materials, and we analyzed them in the best laboratory in the world, and we did the most careful analysis we could. So, and then they started, talking to reporters and saying making negative statements about me, about the colleagues I work with. They were discouraging young people from working on this, which is really terrible. That's the worst you can do, because what happens is that it's the young people are afraid of innovating. They're afraid of saying anything that goes against what these people are saying, just because they will be attacked. And if they need some, to apply for positions, they would not take that risk. So it has a very negative implication to what happens in research more broadly, because if everyone goes along the same path, also the chance of failing is affecting everyone. We don't know. Many times in science, you don't know if you're going along a path that would lead to a discovery or not. So if everyone doing the same, then like everyone was believing in supersymmetry, a new symmetry of nature, and then after decades it was not found. So the entire community that wrote, I don't know, tens of thousands of papers mentioning supersymmetry, everything they wrote is irrelevant because we haven't found it in the Large Hadron Collider. So you want people to examine different paths, because you don't know in advance which one would be successful. And if you are basically attacking personally anyone that deviates from what the herd is doing, you're damaging the prospects of discovery in science. That is really bad. And why would you make a statement about materials that you don't have access to when someone else is doing the analysis? It's just anyway. And the same happened with 3i Atlas when I made this. I can give you an example. There was a claim that they were, the comet experts were saying as soon as it was discovered, it's a comet and it's made most likely out of water. And then there were two teams that reported finding water. We discovered water. There were press releases, spoke to the reporters. I looked at the papers and I realized one of them, has very noisy data that has no signal in it. Okay, the second one was basing the assertion that they discovered water on some assumption about the level of reddening or dust extinction of ultraviolet radiation. And they detected a certain level of ultraviolet radiation and said, oh, there is a lot of extinction, therefore there is a lot of UV emission, therefore there is a lot of water emitting in that band of light. And I said, no, there are reports of much less extinction than these people are using. Therefore, they may, in reality, there may be much less water. And then bloggers were attacking me. How dare you? These are distinguished teams of researchers. They are experts, and you are not an expert. And I said, I look at the data, it's not convincing. Okay. So then 2 weeks later, after all these bloggers were attacking me personally, 2 weeks later, there is a complete report from the Webb telescope that detected with very large significance the emission, the spectral lines of water, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, showing that only 4% of the gas in the vicinity of the object is water by mass. Only 4%, and 96% is something else. It's not water. So, and the estimate for the water is 10 times smaller based on the Webb data, the directly detected water. 10 times less than these previous teams were claiming. Exactly as I said, the data was not reliable. And so, it's really unfortunate, and it offers you a view of how science is being done. Now, what happens really when you submit a paper that goes against the grain, against what people are arguing, like you are suggesting something new? What happens to it is that at first the editor has an opportunity to look at the paper before the editor sends it to reviewers. And what I find nowadays is that the editors prefer not to take any risk. They say, we have a lot of papers coming in. We will not entertain ideas that deviate from what is consensus in the community. Therefore, they refuse to even review it. Okay? And the second thing that happens, if it goes to review, that there is contingency of people who are considering themselves as experts that would put obstacles as much as possible against, that block the publication. And then after the fact, after they block the publication, they would say, oh, this paper was not published in a peer-reviewed journal. Look at that. Because they themselves were responsible for that. Now, I managed to get all these papers published, because they made the valid statement. Eventually, I complained when the editor was not doing their job correctly, or I sent it to a more prestigious journal that accepted it immediately. Like, there were situations where one editor would block it, and then I sent it to a more prestigious journal, and that would be accepted. And it shows you how the system is unfair, and it's sensitive to individuals who are basically maintaining the narrative that is considered acceptable or popular at the time. And then they make the argument, oh, it was not published in our journal, as if that is a blow against that paper, but they are actually responsible for not making diverse set of opinions known to everyone. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that is a very unfortunate situation in academia right now, and we all know about mistakes that were made in the by scientists, even during the COVID pandemic and other. So science is work in progress. It's it's done by iterations, and it should be open to diverse set of opinions. And unfortunately, that's not the case. Now, the whole idea of tenure in academia was invented in order to allow people job security, so they can explore ideas that are different than the conventional ideas. And why is it so much heresy to imagine that objects entering the solar system that look strange, we should consider the possibility they might be technological. And the reason is simple. Even if you assign a very small probability for that, the implications for humanity could be huge. And it's the same argument as Blaise Pascal, the philosopher, made about God. Blaise Pascal said, we cannot ignore the notion of God. Why? Because even if you think that it's very unlikely to exist, the implications for your life could be tremendous if God exists. So therefore, let's discuss it. And the same, that is a well-known principle in the intelligence agencies, because they have to consider black swan events. What does it mean? It means that if you think that it's very unlikely that the Hamas will have an attack on Israeli civilians, and the intelligence agencies say, this is not a viable solution, we know that the Hamas will not do it, then what happens is an event like October 7th, where a lot of people died as a result on both sides. And this could have been prevented if only the intelligence agencies in Israel that had the information coming to their desk were contemplating or imagining the scenario where there would be an attack. They did not imagine such a scenario, and therefore they said it will never happen, and therefore they dismissed data. So that is extremely important in the context of intelligence. You have to consider events that are low probability but high impact. And the intelligence agencies are fully aware, especially now after October 7th, they will never make such a mistake again. They would try to look at the data from different directions and figure. So I say, well, if that happens in in very low probability events here on Earth, why not consider objects that look anomalous? Why not entertain the possibility that they could be black swan events? Why is that heresy? That should be part of the practice where we are trying to get as much data as possible. That's scientific practice, as much data as possible, because we are curious and we wonder whether it might be something other than a rock that we've never seen before.
True. Dr. Avi, in my own scholarship on human identity and evolution, I have observed and I have often, seen how discoveries, every new discovery, in a way, redefines our sense of self. Now, coming to your research, Dr. Avi, your research suggests in a way that extraterrestrial civilizations could be more advanced than ours. I would want to know, what implications does that hold for humanity's understanding, of its place in the universe, Dr.
Well,
Avi?
that's an excellent question. And in 1882, Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, suggested that God is dead. And he meant by that,
I think that was Thus Spake Zarathustra. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yes, exactly. And I read it when I grew up on a farm. I was very interested in philosophy. And I read that statement. And, that statement led to a century of modern science and technology, where the human arrogance and hubris flourished. We to a level where Elon Musk would argue we are probably alone. Okay, and what does it mean? It means that humans are the most intelligent beings in the universe. Now, of course, we're developing artificial intelligence AI, which might become more to have more cognitive abilities than our brain, but so far it didn't. It didn't reach that level. Um, and that would bring a sense of modesty. But I think that if we find alien intelligence that is superior to us, it will be a shock. It's just like my daughters when they were young, they were at home, and they thought that they're at the center of the universe because we as parents gave them a lot of attention. And then when they went on the first day to the kindergarten, they were shocked because they found other kids just like them, and some of them were smarter. And that's the kind of shock that we would have. Now, I think we really need this wake up call. We desperately need this message that would remove our arrogance and bring us back to, a sense of cosmic modesty, where, our intelligence would not be regarded as the pinnacle of creation. Another way to think about it is we have siblings among the stars in our family, and some of our siblings are more accomplished than we are because they managed to get to us when we never reached them so far. So that means they're far more accomplished technologically, and we can learn from them. So the good news is, even though we might have an inferiority complex, those that are more accomplished than us, might replace the respect we had in traditional religions to God, to some entity that is bigger than us. So in the same sense, we would feel a sense of awe when we meet them in the first encounter. It's a blind date. We don't know what to expect, but if they're more accomplished, then we would realize that we should be inspired to do better, and it will just be a better role model than all the role models we find on Earth. Um, and there is also a sense of the possibility of discovering answers to questions, or uh, finding new technologies, new science that we have never been able to develop ourselves as of yet. So we would see what we're missing. We must, our image of the universe is very limited because we don't know what most of the matter and energy in the universe is. 95% is made of substances that we've never seen. We call it dark matter, dark energy, and it's nothing that we encountered here on Earth. And it already shows you that our understanding is very limited. We don't know what happened before the Big Bang. We don't know all kinds of how to unify quantum mechanics and gravity. So we can learn, we can gain new insights. It will be a quantum leap in our knowledge, scientific and technological. And in addition, I think it will change our aspirations. What do we want to accomplish? What's the meaning of life? So a lot of people are depressed, especially now. They think, okay, what's the point? If AI will do my job, what kind of pride do I have in my life? Like, why would I live my life? And people, are getting into a mood of desperation because they just don't feel fulfilled, in the modern time. But if, on the other hand, you realize there is a guest that represents something you can wish you could have, or work towards having, it will change the mindset of humanity and for me personally, one reason I seek intelligence in outer space is I don't often find it in academia. That's one aspect of it. But also because it feels like being in a party where the attendees are misbehaving. When I read the news, people are not not cooperating. They are engaged in conflicts, harming other people rather than helping them. And being in such a party, I look through the window and I wish there would be a new guest that would change the situation. And of course, there is also the implications for religion. So there was a group of religious scholars that visited me, and they said, how would it affect our religious belief in God. And I told them, look, I have two daughters, and when the second one was born, it didn't take away any of my love to the first one. So that means that, if you think that God can attend to only one child, the human civilization, then you have a very limiting view of God as a parent that can have only one child, And in reality, God may have created many civilizations, and that we should feel some sense of kinship to them, and because as if they are members of our family of intelligent civilizations, and it should just increase your awe, enhance it with respect to your religious belief rather than take away from it.
Dr. Avi, from my background in studying how belief system shapes human resilience, and I mean, to tell you honestly, I really don't want to ignore the spiritual dimension of the question that I'm about to ask you. And again, it's going back to religion and belief system. Dr. Avi, don't you think that finding strong evidence of extraterrestrial life, like alien technology, UFO, all of these discoveries can really shake the very pillar of religion and traditional belief system? Because to tell you honestly, from my own personal experience, if I had latched on to my religious belief system, I wouldn't have explored psychology and mental health. I had to let go of a lot of things in order to explore and absorb, become a sponge and absorb things, because my belief system was telling me, don't absorb this, don't absorb that, expel this, purge this, and only limited things needs to be absorbed. So I would want to know, Dr. Avi, what are your thoughts? I mean, do we have to let go of the traditional belief and system?
Yeah, so the way I see it is science is very different from a belief system in the sense that we're guided by evidence. So suppose we see some technologies in the sky that outperform whatever we imagined before. It's much more inspiring than any of the scripts written in Hollywood for science fiction movies. Just think about finding something that is really you've never thought about before, because we never had that experience. It's just like going on a blind date and seeing in front of you something you've never experienced before. Uh, and of course, there are two types of blind dates. You might see something that you're inspired by that is very friendly, but you might also meet a serial killer. That these are the two possible experiences. In any way, it will shake your mindset in a way that would change everything. So the way I think about it is that, and by the way, it will be a real thing in reality. So I'm not. Nobody would ask you to believe in something that you've never seen. You will just see it in photographs. This thing, we will have either materials from it, or we have good accounting for whatever it was about, and it will all be in the language of science. We will record the properties of the materials of the visitor with our best equipment, our best instruments, scientific instruments. So it will be something real, but it's awe-inspiring because you've never seen it before. And to me, it will be a new level of human consciousness, of the way we perceive our place in the universe. Because until now, we thought of the universe as made of lifeless objects, and most scientists would argue it's an extraordinary claim to imagine an intelligent civilization near another star. I think of it as an ordinary claim, and once we find it, once we encounter it, I think it will change everything. But it will bring back the sense of wonder and awe that belong to traditional religion. So, but it would be in a different context, because you will not have a clergy, some religious person telling you should believe this story. It will not be about storytelling, because usually what religions do is telling you a story about something that happened in the past, or something that you're supposed to believe in. Or here, it's not a story. It's something that is in reality. We documented it. We used instruments to record it. we know what it is, and yet it's awe-inspiring because it goes well beyond anything that you've witnessed on Earth before. So it's a new level of awe, and to me, it could replace the awe that we had based on stories. But it's something that even you, as a psychiatrist, and you would be influenced by, because you cannot ignore it if it's something real. Just think about a visitor to your backyard. You've been lonely forever. You grew up alone in a house, and suddenly there is a visitor in your backyard, and that visitor is intelligent. Like, that would be a whole new experience for you, and it will change your future, because now you realize you have a partner out there that that you can have some relationship to, and so it's even more inspiring than meeting a partner on a blind date here on Earth, because this partner is from another star, and it could be very different than what we are used to. So I think it, first of all, the difference from religions in the past is that you witness it, you have the direct experience, and it's documented in scientific reports. It's not a story written in a book that you have no way of verifying. And then, in addition, it would be something that was never imagined, and the combination of these two things will change the way, the meaning to our life, the way we think about our future, everything. So it's the biggest, I see it as the biggest question in science. Do these things exist? Can we? And frankly, if we will not seek them, if we will not search for them, we will never find them. So when scientists say, "Oh, we've never seen evidence for that, and therefore we shouldn't look for that," well, obviously you've never seen evidence because you didn't look for that.
True. And before we conclude today's discussion, Dr. Avi, I personally believe science thrives when knowledge is shared collectively. It really thrives, evolves, and grows. I would want to know, Dr. Avi, what are the next steps for your research, and how can both the scientific community and the wider public support this search for extraterrestrial life?
Right. So, as a scientist, I love as much data as possible, because then people cannot push anomalies under the carpet of traditional thinking. When you have a lot of evidence, there is no way out. It's only when scientists say, "Oh, it's a rock of a type that we've never seen before. Forget about it. It's a rock." Then they become lazy. They don't collect data and they move on. Okay, and that's the worst enemy of progress. What you want is to get as much data as possible so that it will not be possible to say that if you have a high resolution image of an object and it doesn't look like a rock, it's not a rock. Okay, so we need to get to the point where we collect as much data as possible. And gladly, the Rubin Observatory in Chile will find new interstellar objects, maybe 50 of them in the coming decade, and then we can study each and every one of them. That's my hope, to get as much data as possible. There is also the whole subject of unidentified anomalous phenomena on Earth that was highlighted in congressional hearings in the US, and Director of National Intelligence that reported to Congress about it. And I am leading the Galileo Project that is currently building observatories that would collect as much data about objects near Earth to figure out if there is anything extraterrestrial among them, or they're all human-made objects. We built already 3 observatories, but if we get more funding, then we can do much more work on that. The astronomy community is planning to invest $10 billion over the next 2 decades in the search for microbes. They are completely obsessed with microbes. That's the highest priority. And my point is, even though microbes may be much more abundant, intelligent technologies might be easier to detect. And therefore, we should invest in both comparable sums of money to hedge our bets. So if I had my wish, I would say, let's invest billions of dollars in the search for technological signatures. And that includes objects coming into the solar system that look anomalous. That includes looking for like mega structures around other stars, or artificial lights coming from exoplanets, or all kinds of technological signatures that we can imagine. But let's beef up the effort by investing resources, because extraordinary evidence requires extraordinary funding.
True. So thank you so much, Dr. Avi. It was such a wonderful discussion today, and I'm looking forward to have you again with my, another set of questions. And thank you so much, Dr.
Well,
Avi.
I really enjoyed the conversation. It was wonderful to meet you.